Starting off with our continuing focus here on World is One News, WION Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui, who reports extensively on Pakistan affairs, has been targeted. Let's tell you more about this blatant attack that took place on freedom of press in Pakistan. Taha Siddiqui's car was stopped by 10 to 12 men while he was on his way to the airport. He was beaten up. We understand he is with the police now. Let's also show you two tweets that sum up the entire incident and tell you more about what really went on. First is from the Twitter handle of Pakistan journalist Cyril Almeida. It says, and I'm quoting, "This is Taha Siddiqui using Cyril's account. I was on my way to the airport today at 8:20 a.m. when 10 to 12 armed men stopped my cab and forcibly tried to abduct me. I managed to escape safe and with police now, looking for support in any way possible." And he ended that tweet with the hashtag Stop Enforced Disappearances. The second tweet is from another journalist, Asad Hashim's handle, that says, and I'm quoting from that tweet, "With Taha Siddiqui right now, it is a miracle that he escaped. He was beaten, threatened with death, and his belongings taken away. This is unacceptable. Journalism is not a crime." Who or which agency could be behind the attempted abduction and targeting of WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui? In Pakistan, journalists and activists routinely face threats, intimidation and violence from state security agencies and militant groups. State security agencies range from the Army's notorious ISI or the Inter-Services Intelligence to the Civilian Intelligence Bureau, both of which are seen as instruments of the deep state. But the most feared of all is the ISI, and those most at risk would have at some point crossed the agency's red lines. One red line that journalists have learned to respect is exposing any security lapses by the Army. The Army's links to banned Islamic militant groups is another line. Exposing abuses by the Army and the ISI in Balochistan district is a strict no-no. A journalist who reported about the Al-Qaeda infiltration into the Army was threatened with murder. Pakistani and international human rights outfits have extensively documented the abduction, torture and killing of scores of activists and journalists. Among the most brutal was the abduction and the killing of Salim Shiazad, reporter from Asia Times and the Italian news agency. He was picked up by unknown persons from Islamabad on May 29, 2011, and 3 days later, his body bearing marks of torture was found 80 kilometers away in Mandi, Bahauddin. In April 2014, well-known Geo News anchor Hamid Mir was attacked and fired upon in Karachi by 4 motorcycle-borne gunmen. He was hit in the stomach and legs but survived to tell the tale. Hamid Mir says the ISI was responsible and he was aware of a plot to kill him. But Mir has also been the target of armed Islamic groups. The Tehreek-e-Taliban publicly admitted that it had planted a bomb in his car in Islamabad in an attempt to kill him for his secular agenda. Others have also been targeted by shadowy armed groups. In April 2015, human rights activist Sareen Mahmood was killed in Karachi. Her killer said she was pursuing a liberal secular agenda. 4 bloggers were abducted from different cities in January last year. Journalists have come under fire in places like Balochistan. They are targeted by the ISI and the Islamic groups for filing reports on disappearances, torture and indiscriminate killings. Reports of such torture and killings from Gilgit-Baltistan have become a norm. In fact, reporting from Gilgit-Baltistan has also become difficult because of the iron control exercised by the Army and the leeway given to Sunni radicals to carry out their own brand of justice. What happened today is the result of the fearless reportage, fearless journalism that our Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui has been resorting to. Let's give you a glimpse into one of his earlier reports. Let's now listen into Taha Siddiqui's report on the Kulbhushan Jadhav family meeting coverage, which took place on December 25th last year, after which Taha was targeted for standing up to the truth and reporting facts unfairly. Taha had openly expressed his displeasure about Pakistan media's poor treatment of the Jadhav family and had urged that not all Pakistani journalists should be painted with the same brush. Here's his earlier report.
When Kulbhushan Yadav's family visited the Foreign Office, I was a witness to the way the journalists behaved at the entry and exit of the family who were accompanied by the Indian diplomat. Especially when they came out, they started shouting and screaming, not just questions, which is okay because normally questions are a job of a journalist, and in today's TV world, when you interact with someone and you throw questions at them, and even if they don't answer, that can be aired and made a point out of that particular sort of interaction. But this time around, the journalists present over there at the Foreign Office building were not asking questions. They were actually accusing, they were alleging that, Kulbhushan Yadav's mother, asking her how she felt being a terrorist mother, asking the wife how she felt about being married to someone who has killed hundreds of Pakistanis. And all these are political statements. And to top it off, not just that, while they were exiting, one of the journalists then started to chant "Long live Pakistan" slogans and riled up all the rest of the journalists, and they all joined in the chorus. And when I saw this, it made me feel a bit of, disappointed in my own community, in my own journalist community. And I went on to report this the very same day on my channel, but also at the same time talked about it on Twitter online, and the reason for putting it out there was that I want to tell the other side across the border, the Indians, that while there are journalists like that who misbehaved with the family of Kulbhushan Yadav, with the women who may have been meeting Kulbhushan Yadav for the last time, given the fact that he's on death row and can be executed any day. But despite these journalists did not sort of accommodate for them or feel any sympathy towards the women, but still, despite that, there are journalists like me who felt that this was wrong and wanted to put our voice out there and tell the Indian audience and the world and people across the border that not everyone is like that, and there is still some sanity prevailing in Pakistan, and some people who think that this was wrong, and not everybody behaved the way we saw in the news later on. Also, the video surfaced about the heckling, and then the Ministry of External Affairs in India also complained about it. But putting my voice out there, it's my attempt to say that we're not all the same. Taha Siddiqui, WION, Islamabad.
Our Pakistan Bureau Chief, Taha Siddiqui, who reports extensively on affairs in Pakistan, has been targeted.
While there are journalists like that who misbehaved with the family of Kulbhushan Yadav.
Taha obviously works for WION, so he has a connection with an Indian international channel.
Taha has always been very correct and very good in his reporting.
Let's broaden this up and get in further perspectives. Joining us on the broadcast is Professor Brahma Chelani, a strategic expert. Also joining us in just a short bit will be a human rights activist, Dr. Farzana Bari. Coming to you first, Professor Chelani, your initial reaction to what we've been reporting on for the last few hours. Are you surprised at all, given Pakistan's track record on dealing with journalists, that our Pakistan Bureau Chief is trashed? He is threatened with death, and he is intimidated by 10 to 12 men this morning.
It was a brutal attack, but it hasn't come as a surprise. Given the fact that Pakistan is a state that doesn't really believe in the rule of law. Just a few days ago, Asma Jahangir had tweeted about the from the Karachi University hostel. If they can abduct university students, then trashing an Indian journalist for doing his duty shouldn't come as a surprise.
Professor Charani, we've been talking about how Pakistan is known to be a country which is hostile to journalists who do not speak in the language that they would like. That, of course, came to the fore even during the meeting between Kulbhushan Jadhav and his mother and wife, during which offensive questions were hurled towards the family members and for which the media personnel were thanked. And those who did not toe that line were also intimidated, and something that Taha Siddiqui also reported extensively on. So I want to ask you, where is the hope that the inquiry into this latest incident, this latest attack on Taha Siddiqui will be fair, given that he's already earlier on as well been intimidated by the FIA?
To expect that the Pakistani authorities are going to investigate this attack fairly and bring to justice the attackers is to live in hope. Because look at Pakistan's track record. It has refused to bring to justice even the Mumbai attackers, those guys who carried out massive assaults in Mumbai city and killed more than 170 people. In fact, the mastermind of that attack, Hafiz Saeed, is actually being propped up so that he becomes a political figure in Pakistan. So this linkage between the military / security agencies and terrorist groups is deeply rooted in Pakistan. I don't see this linkage ending anytime soon.
What is the message that Pakistan establishment is giving out with repeated intimidation of journalists and none of those assaulters being brought to book in the recent past, and how this has been a string of events, how we of course can go into further detail of each of those incidents, and this latest attack of course is another addition to that ugly list of intimidation, of attacks on journalists.
You're right. But the main message is for your channel, WION. The message to WION is that you are doing your job a bit too fairly. You are doing your job objectively, which we don't like. This is Pakistan's message to your channel. The message is that if you do not fall in line, if you do not distort your coverage to the liking of Pakistan, then your journalist in Pakistan is going to get more thrashing, get more harassment, and this brutal attack today is just a opening shot, a warning that if he doesn't fall in line, he might be abducted or something worse might happen to him.
And there is no guarantee that he can return to doing his job for which he was targeted and continue to do so without being intimidated or threatened in the near future yet again. There is absolutely no assurance, even though we believe that the police is now taking care of the situation, is now investigating this incident, but we cannot say for sure if a similar incident will not be repeated with Taha in time to come.
Absolutely. But I think your journalist is going to feel very intimidated, is going to be fearful. He will not be able to function freely. He will not be able to report objectively because his very life is under threat now. And this
that's something that, yes, and that's something that he has been.
Channel,
and this is
that stop doing this objective journalism, which we in Pakistan do not like.
And that's something that he has been doing for the longest time, speaking in a language that the Pakistani establishment does not favor, and which results in ugly attacks like these, Professor Chalani. But also speaking a little bit about the earlier incidents wherein journalists have been attacked, wherein media personnel have been threatened. To what extent do you believe that this also is a sign that Pakistan's nervosity are coming to the fore yet again? Soft targets like journalists are being attacked.
Yeah, but let's not forget, and I'm sure you and your viewers are aware of it, that Pakistani journalists who have refused to toe the ISI line have been brutally assaulted in the past.
Yes.
Including a very famous editor/TV personality. A couple of journalists have actually disappeared. They are presumed to be dead. Some others have been murdered by the security agencies. So Pakistan has a gruesome track record. ISI and the other intelligence agencies systematically go after journalists because their agenda is information control. When journalists do not toe their line, they open themselves to attack by the security agencies. In other countries, in normal countries, security agencies protect citizens. In Pakistan, the security agencies target innocent citizens.
Absolutely, and let's also get our viewers a further sense of how this is a long-drawn history that we are talking about. It's not an isolated case. It's not the first time that a journalist or a media personnel in Pakistan has been targeted only for doing his or her job. Pakistan has been in a state of anarchy for several decades. There is no effective civilian government. The army and the ISI are virtually in control, and there's always been a nexus between many Islamist groups and the security establishment of Pakistan. Abductions and disappearances are on the rise. WION has not been spared either. WION's Islamabad Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui was already harassed and interrogated by authorities several times. What was his crime? Fearless and truthful reportage, even and especially on the uprising in Balochistan and the Indian prisoner Kulbhushan Jadhav. This morning, Taha escaped kidnapping by the skin of his teeth. Many others have not been that lucky in the history of the country. Here's a timeline of the horrific kidnapping and repeated assaults that journalists have been exposed to. There, of course, beginning with the horrific kidnapping and beheading of American Jewish journalist Daniel Pearl, which took place in January 2002. In October 2004, 2 years later, 2 Chinese engineers were abducted. One was killed, the other rescued. In September 2008, a Polish engineer was kidnapped and later beheaded. His driver was shot dead. In November 2008, the same year, a Canadian journalist was kidnapped along with her local colleagues. The latter were freed, and the journalist died tragically of hepatitis while in captivity. In February 2009, an American official was kidnapped and later released, but his driver was killed. In July 2011, a Swiss couple were abducted, but they later managed to escape. A month later, an American aid worker was also kidnapped, but died in an American drone strike several years later. In January 2012, 2 European workers were abducted. One appeared in a proof of life video and was later freed, and the other died in a drone strike. In March 2013, 2 Czech tourists were kidnapped along with a Pakistani police officer who was later released. The women were released after a hefty ransom of $6 million was paid. And in May 2017, 2 Chinese teachers were kidnapped and were presumed killed after their abductors released a gruesome video of 2 bleeding bodies lying on the ground. Let's go back across to Professor Chalani, who's been breaking it down for us and giving his perspectives on this. To what extent do you see this as another case that the Indian establishment must take up strongly with the Pakistani authorities?
You raise a very important question. The Indian government is responsible for the safety of Indian journalists operating overseas. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs is duty bound to take up this matter with the Pakistani authorities, because we should put pressure on Pakistani authorities to investigate this brutal assault on the journalist and to bring to justice the attackers who attacked him. And the MEA should clearly specify that it's seeking a investigation in a time-bound manner, and it wants to see the culprits arrested and brought to trial.
All right, stay with me, Professor Chelani. Let's just bring our viewers up to speed with what we have been covering all along, and just a recap for our viewers who might just be tuning in. On your screens is WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui, who this morning, while on his way to the airport, was stopped by 10 to 12 men. He was then dragged out of the cab. He was thrashed. He was threatened to death. And he fortunately managed to escape from that brutal attack. On your screens is a sample of the extent to which he was assaulted. And he is now with the police authorities. But we have been talking all along about how this is just another sad addition to a string of such incidents. This is, of course, not an isolated incident that we've been talking about. Many such in the past that we just outlined for our viewers as well over the years, for decades now, that Pakistan has been, in a way, trying to give out a message through those assaults of journalists only for doing their job. Journalists have been targeted, just like Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui this morning was assaulted by 10 to 12 men while on his way to the airport, purely for doing his job. We'll also now play out for you an account that Pakistan Bureau Chief of WION, Taha Siddiqui, has shared with us. He sent us this account narrating what happened this morning and that entire ordeal. Let's play out for you what Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui had to deal with this morning purely for doing his job.
4 guys came out. They were all armed. They had AK-47s. One of them had a pistol. They came out and they came to my side of the car. I was sitting at the back on the left side, and they opened the door and they started to pull me out and drag me out. And I was like, what have I done? I was like, excuse me, guys. It was you who stopped the car. I thought it was a robbery, or it was perhaps, a road rage incident. But at that time, one of them said, what do you think of yourself? Do you think you're somebody? Like something on those lines, he said to me in English. Very well spoken, very proper accent English. And that's when I realized that something else is going on. And I realized that I was being abducted.
That is what Pakistan Bureau Chief of WION, Taha Siddiqui, had to deal with this morning, as he just narrated for our viewers the account of that harassment when 10 to 12 men stopped his cab when he was on his way to the airport and forcibly tried to drag him out and then thrashed him. Let's play out for you once again that ordeal, that account that Taha Siddiqui is narrating for us.
4 guys came out. They were all armed. They had AK-47s. One of them had a pistol. They came out and they came to my side of the car. I was sitting at the back on the left side, and they opened the door and they started to pull me out and drag me out. And I was like, what have I done? I was like, excuse me, guys. It was you who stopped the car. I thought it was a robbery, or it was perhaps, a road rage incident. But at that time, one of them said, what do you think of yourself? Do you think you're somebody? Like something on those lines, he said to me in English. Very well spoken, very proper accent English. And that's when I realized that something else is going on. And I realized that I was being abducted.
WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui in that video recounting that harassment, that ordeal, that torture that he had to deal with only for doing his job. This is the account that many in India have been left absolutely stunned by, but at the same time not surprised by, because this is the latest addition to Pakistan's continuing harassment of journalists only for doing their job. Pakistan's Bureau Chief of WION, Taha Siddiqui, was this morning, as he just narrated in that video, trashed and intimidated and threatened by 10 to 12 men. He was then, he fortunately managed to escape. On your screens is that image of Taha Siddiqui after that ordeal, that harassment that he had to endure. Let's also get our viewers a sense of what this really means. Pakistan's message there to the journalists fraternity that if they do not speak in a language that the establishment does not agree with, this is the kind of harassment that they will have to endure.
Our Pakistan Bureau Chief, Taha Siddiqui, who reports extensively on affairs in Pakistan, has been targeted.
While there are journalists like that who misbehaved with the family of Kulbhushan Yadav.
Taha obviously works for WION, so he has a connection with an Indian international channel.
Taha has always been very correct and very good in his reporting.
Professor Brahma Chalani has been with us continuously, sharing his perspectives. Professor Chalani, we have played up for our viewers Taha's own version. His ordeal has been narrated by him, what he had to really deal with for only doing his job. But Professor Chalani, your initial reaction also to that video that we just played out, that's Taha Siddiqui for the first time sharing a detailed account of the sequence of events and that harassment that he had to endure.
It's clear that Mr. Siddiqui was targeted by intelligence agencies in Pakistan for doing his job, that the assault on him and the abduction bid was designed essentially to convey a message to him that he has been critical of Pakistan, that his reporting has been a bit too fair to the liking of the Pakistani security agencies, and that he either behaves or risks something further, something more dire. And I think this abduction bid / assault on him is going to leave him quite intimidated, quite frightened.
And Professor, as he narrates in that video, in that account that he's shared for the viewers, these were men armed with AK-47s and trying to ask him if he is somebody, in a way, trying to question his authority for speaking the truth for his reportage and trying to intimidate him. But once again, does this not suggest the nervosity that Pakistan has been grappling with? These are men armed with AK-47s trying to intimidate a journalist.
Yes. As I mentioned, if they can abduct university students, take them out from hostel. These are plainclothes security people. They go to the university, they go into the hostel, they just abduct university students because they happen to be Baluch. Now, if they can do that to their own citizens, obviously, an Indian operating on Pakistani soil, doing his duty as a journalist, is going to be an easy target. Another important point to bear in mind is that Pakistan is not a normal state. It's a very abnormal state. The government in power takes all the blame, but it's actually not responsible for such incidents. Its officials are not involved in such crimes. It's the intelligence agencies, the security agencies who are not answerable to the government that are doing such abductions, assaults, and other crimes. The question is that in a country where the government is not in charge of the intelligence agencies, in charge of the military, not in charge of the nuclear establishment, how can that country function effectively? And this poses a serious dilemma for foreign journalists. You mentioned the case of Daniel Pearl, who was abducted and murdered in Pakistan. But Indian journalists, because they happen to be Indian, like Mr. Siddiqui, are easy prey for the ISI and other intelligence operatives in Pakistan.
All right, stay with me, Professor Chelani. Once again, just recapping for our viewers who might just be tuning in. This is another sad addition, another ugly addition to the string of attacks that Pakistan journalists have been grappling with. This is Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui on your screens, who this morning was assaulted while on his way to the airport. He was thrashed by 10 to 12 men. And he's also narrated through a video that he's sent out. He's recounting that entire ordeal where he's talking about how there were men armed with AK-47s who stopped his cab, tried to force him out, trashed him and intimidated him. Let's play out that video for our viewers once again, where he recounts that entire ordeal. This video was sent just moments after that assault. WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief has recounted that entire ordeal.
4 guys came out. They were all armed. They had AK-47s. One of them had a pistol. They came out and they came to my side of the car. I was sitting at the back on the left side, and they opened the door and they started to pull me out and drag me out. And I was like, what have I done? I was like, excuse me, guys. It was you who stopped the car. I thought it was a robbery, or it was perhaps, a road rage incident. But at that time, one of them said, what do you think of yourself? Do you think you're somebody? Like something on those lines, he said to me in English. Very well spoken, very proper accent English. And that's when I realized that something else is going on. And I realized that I was being abducted.
Professor Chelani has been sharing his perspectives all along, but does this not also sadden all of us here, Professor Chelani, because this ultimately is a battle that journalists have been waging for the longest time in a country like Pakistan, in a complex situation like we just discussed, like Pakistan. And we have no assurance, no guarantee that this is going to be the last such incident. There has been continued resistance that journalists have been putting out, yes, but there are only a few voices who are doing that, and only a few voices who are supporting those who are doing that.
Yes, it's quite a struggle in Pakistan to uphold press freedom, because constitutionally Pakistan has press freedom. It's supposed to be a democracy, but in reality, Pakistan is not a democracy. It is a country that pretends to be a democracy, and therefore it's very difficult for journalists to operate independently in Pakistan. They're always in fear. They are fearful of the security agencies. They're fearful of being abducted. They're fearful of being attacked. And Mr. Siddiqui is just a latest example of having fallen victim this kind of practice in Pakistan.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Professor Brahma Chelani, I appreciate very much your joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspectives and helping our viewers understand the gravity of the situation that our Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui had to grapple with this morning. But it's also largely a situation that the country has been dealing with, that the journalists and the media fraternity in the country have been grappling with for the longest time. Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui on your screens, who this morning was assaulted only for doing his job. We're going to take a very short break at this point. Much more coming up on the other side in just a bit.
Our Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui, who reports extensively on affairs in Pakistan, has been targeted.
While there are journalists like that who misbehaved with the family of Kulbhushan Yadav.
Taha obviously works for WION, so he has a connection with an Indian international channel.
Taha has always been very correct and very good in his reporting.